Welcome back. I'm Kim Bailey. She's Fulyana Osborne. This is Inside Exec. Today we're going to talk about an article that was in the newspaper recently about a school principal, a high school principal, who waited 17 years, and I want to use waited in inverted commas, for whom it took 17 years before he actually got promoted into the principal. 14 years, I'm being corrected. Whatever.
He's been a headmaster for 17.
Been a headmaster for 17 years. Took him 14 years to be promoted or selected into that role in the public school system, let me say. And public school in terms of government-sponsored education rather than private schools is how we approach it in this country. I know it's different in other countries. It's the other way around. The story is about this fellow and about his journey through life. And he is related to a very well-known journalist in this country, and so there were comments from his brother as well about their upbringing and the view of one journalist to another who was writing the story about this particular man. But what intrigued us both in reading this article were the commitment that this fellow had to his career, regardless of how long it took for him to reach the stage that he's at, and that when he got to that stage, his utter, complete commitment was to the school where he was and to making that an environment for developing kids that he really wanted to have as part of his legacy of being an educator in this country. One of the things that he talked about in the article is that he asks, when he sees the kids in the morning, when he interacts with them, he asks them 4 questions, and it's always the same 4 questions and has been for all of those years. And I love these questions, and that was the thing that resonated with me in the article, was that these questions, and I think that we could use them in our organisations all of the time. And the 4 questions are: what did you have for breakfast? What time did you go to sleep last night? What exercise are you going to do this week? Let's ask Fulyana, what exercise are you going to do this week? And what are you reading for pleasure at the moment? Now, I think they're 4 very interesting questions, and they will tell you a lot about people and about their patterns and about their work-life balance, all of the things that we've talked about in the past and we'll continue to talk about, I'm sure. But the idea of the breakfast question, first of all, is one that I started to think about as soon as I read it, because I know that in my early working career, so let's say early 20s to mid-30s, when it was starting out on the corporate ladder and establishing yourself in a role and establishing the career path that you're going to take, as well as for me, that was a time where marriage came and family came as well. And so juggling all of those things, work side of things seemed to take more precedence as against personal stuff. So, family was obviously important as well. But I can remember a time where I didn't have breakfast. And it was almost like a badge of honour. Oh, no, I haven't had any breakfast this morning. No time for breakfast. Oh, no, I don't have breakfast. Oh, I don't do breakfast because I'm focused on work. I'm doing this. I've got to travel. I've always travelled for work. So it was always about, no, I can't have breakfast because I have to travel. And I find myself 40 years later still doing the same thing sometimes. So this morning I haven't had breakfast this morning. I know, very bad. And it's not because I couldn't get up and I couldn't have it, but I tell myself this thing of I don't like to travel if I've just eaten. And that's true to a certain extent. I don't like to travel. She's laughing. She'll laugh herself under the table. I'll be the same if I'm driving. So today was the train ride. But if I'm driving any distance, I won't eat before I get in the car to drive. But when I have my 2-hour break, then I'll have something then. And it's a stupid thing to do. Really, there are so many choices you can make about what you put into your body. It doesn't have to be breakfast in inverted commas. I don't have to go out and make the rolled oats and add the walnuts and all the other things that go with it. I could just have a drinkable yogurt and then I've had breakfast. For some reason, that hangs over into these days. She's just having the best time. You should see the laughter in this room at the moment.
Oh, I'm so
I know, I will never live it down. When I look at those questions, I haven't had breakfast this morning, so that will make me a little bit less on the ball than I should be, because obviously my body's not got the fuel it needs to start up the day. So it's the wrong thing to do for a whole host of reasons that we won't go into now. What time did I go to sleep last night? I actually went to sleep earlier than I normally would because I knew I'd be up and about early, and I was up early yesterday morning for some other stuff as well. So I went to sleep at about 11ish, and I was up at 5:30. So, reasonable amount of sleep. What am I going to do for exercise this week? Well, because I was running late this morning because I missed the first train that I was going to get, I had to walk up a hill to get here to where we're recording. So that's going to be my quota. I'll put my hand up now and say I've done what I'm going to do for exercise this week. No, I don't plan it as much as I used to. But when I was going to the gym really religiously every other day, then I knew exactly what I was planning to do for exercise because I had a routine that I did some days aerobic, some days just the resistance training. But these days, I probably look at it in a broader sense. I probably would think about in a week, yes, I should get some exercise. So mostly it has to do with walking. So I'll park further away from where I'm going, so I've got a bit of a walk, or I'll walk uphill, or I'll walk a different way to where I'm going, or I'll get out into the farm and do some gardening or some other farm work and count that as my exercise for the week. But, there again, just 4 questions. 2 of them I'm already failing on because I'm not concentrating on those things. And the last thing about what are you reading for pleasure, I can actually honestly put up my hand and say that I always have something on the go that I'm reading for pleasure. And I set myself a target 2 years ago now. It's taken me 2 years to read all of the works of Robert Louis Stevenson, and I have them on the Kindle, and so I think I'm 65% through, so I've probably still got another 12 months to go before I'll finish them all. But it's been a real target and a real joy for me to read such a different range of things that he wrote on, and the opinions he had and the views he expressed and the way he expressed them. So I always have that. But as you know from other podcasts, I really struggle with non-pleasure reading. So I did the challenge earlier in the year where I had to read half an hour a day of something that was non-fiction, and I struggled, and I said it to you all, that I struggled to find something that was going to compel me to do that half-hour reading every day. But it did set me on a path of reading that stuff, although I haven't read any for a little bit of time. She's getting anxious now, I better let her say something. But in terms of those 4 questions, I just thought that they were excellent questions for us to look at ourselves and to look at our workforce. And when she's had a chance to express herself, I'm actually going to pursue that and look at how that relates to how you feel about people when you ask those questions. You may speak. What have I gone? 8.5 minutes. Yes, it's a monologue.
I think those questions are absolutely very relevant. You're right, very relevant to work. And you think about it, in this article, he gives an example of one of the students, high school student, who got himself into trouble and went to the headmaster's office.
Detention, it's called.
Oh, okay, that one. Okay, and he,
as if she didn't.
I've never had to go there.
Never had to go to detention. Often had to go to the principal's office.
And he asked him those questions, and I think the points are very valid. Is that if you don't have breakfast, if you're not sleeping enough, if you're not looking at things outside your own work environment, at work, you might be that particular day a bit more snappy. You might be less tolerant of things that you normally would tolerate better. Your productivity might be waning. So these are very, very good advice and questions to ask yourself regularly when you see yourself not being yourself. Is why is that? Am I doing those things? Which is really good. But on the career side, I think in this article, which I recommend you read, it talked about right from the beginning, he had this, not vision, but he wanted to be in education. He wanted to be an educator. So much so that even at a very young age, he wrote down, if I was running the school, who will I hire out of those people I'm observing? So that's good. So in this sense, he worked towards, despite obstacles. He had 2 accidents in his life, that injuries in his life that other people used as an excuse. He didn't. Now, we're not saying everybody has to wait 14 years for the job. If it's a passion, he stayed in his passion area. So he stayed in education. He was a teacher. He wanted to be a principal so he could do more for the kids. He particularly wanted to help people in need, kids. So, and he's passionate about that. I guess it's that deep-seated desire that you have for yourself of whatever it is. You keep it, and despite all the obstacles and that, you continue with it, and it pays off in the end. If you're doing it just for the career, then of course you can move around to get to the top if that's what your aim is. But the thing that also is very impressive is the results. The results speak for themselves, both at school level, the kids, and then how much satisfaction he would have in his mind, he didn't do it for that purpose by the sound of him, but of having left so much behind through other people.
Yeah. It's about finding your why.
Yes.
Because just in all of that discussion, here is a man who, at a very early age, knew what his why was. His why was to be, was the educator side of things, not to be the school principal, not to be the deputy principal, not to be a teacher, but to be an educator.
Yeah.
And that was his why, and that hasn't changed, and that's been his focus. So if you're in the corporate world and you're looking at moving up the ladder, what's your why?
Yeah.
Not being the CEO is not a why. It's a much deeper and a much more fulfilling activity that you need to find, and you need to find out what your why is, and you need to be true to that, because when you move away from what your why is, you lose satisfaction. You might move up the ladder, but you certainly lose satisfaction about what you're doing and how you're doing it. And I can say that with experience, because for many years, as you know, I moved around in the corporate world, both as a paid employee and as a consultant. And I thought that was my, well, I didn't really think about it. I just thought that was what you did with your career. I hadn't identified my why. And I probably didn't really identify my why. I had an inkling of it in a couple of the roles that I had in the government sector, but I didn't really identify it until very much later, when I looked at what is it that I really enjoy doing, what is it that I want to do, and you'll see from the website that I talk about my why, and my why is about bringing out the best in people, making people feel that they can do things better than they thought they could. And how that happens, that doesn't have a phrase that covers it. I'm not an educator in that sense, because sometimes they know what they need to do, so I'm not teaching them anything. And I'm not a facilitator, because it's not always about the things that they've got. Sometimes they do need to learn other stuff. It's about people, so my why is about people, and I was always trying to fit into it was the square peg in the round hole, always trying to fit into a corporate or an organisational format that wanted me to do things in this certain way, because that was what the organisation needed, not what the people needed. And my why is about people. So I needed to find an environment where my why, whatever we call it, could be utilised, and people would find it, would know that they needed it, would be able to use it. And so it isn't in one industry. And so what I find now is that my why covers all sorts of industries and all sorts of people. I couldn't identify and say, this is this kind of person that I can help, because when I look at the people, they're all different, and they're all doing things for different reasons. They all have different whys. Yeah. But my why helps them achieve their whys. Yeah. So it comes back to the why thing. And we do have a podcast, which I'll put at the bottom of this listing, so that you can go back and you can see the Simon Sinek video, and you can work out from him what your why is. Because I do think it's a very revealing exercise to know it and to understand it, and to start to think about it in terms of what you're doing with your career and where you're going. We better get back to the article.
Yeah. No, but I think it's relevant. It's the whole idea of this article, apart from the what a great guy, is the learning, and this is the learning. And sometimes he knew that at a very young age, or very early in career, about that's what he wanted to do. But a lot of us don't. And you do change with time as well. So your why will change. So you might started that way. In this case, he didn't. He's all the way through. I know people like that in business sense who knew which aspect of corporate they want to be in, and they're still in there, and their career has been exactly as they envisaged and hoped, and they were true to it. For some of us, it's what am I doing? What do I like about what I'm doing? What I've learned, and then keep evolving or then changing. So whatever you're doing, you're only going to be working for majority of your life. So you want it to be an enjoyment as well as the satisfaction factor is to me is the most important. Of course, the money is as you're going through life because you need to pay for things, but the satisfaction, and if you keep reviewing that, you can pursue it and do it. And he has proven that. He has proven that with very, very good results.
And that probably leads on to the other thing that I noted about that those 4 questions gave you some insight into that person that you were interacting with. My reaction was, do we do this with our work colleagues and our team members? Do we do it with our families? Because what happened within the article, when the journalist was talking to others, the views of others were reflecting that underlying care and concern and education in a certain way that this fellow was showing by asking those 4 questions. So that what had happened was that it elicited this sense of pride that these other people were expressing about the subject of the article and saying what they were most proud of in this person were things that he probably wouldn't have identified himself. And so then I started to think about, well, with the people that I work with or my family members, you know, if I thought about what am I proud of within that framework, and I thought about a few people and I thought, well, the one I probably can talk about most comfortably, because I know he'll never listen to it, is my brother. What am I most proud of in terms of him? He's done a whole host of things in his life. He's been a snow ski instructor. He's been a snowmaker. You know, for the first 10 years of his life after he left school, he didn't see summer. He worked winter here and winter in the US for the ski seasons. But that, not the sum of him. Always been very active, loves his cycling, still does his cycling despite knee reconstructions and all those sorts of things. He currently runs some goats on the farm, and he makes chili sauce, which he sells at the markets, and he works part-time at Bunnings. Give Bunnings a plug. So if I look at him and I think, what am I, bottom line, what am I most proud of, is that he will do whatever it takes. He was a single parent. He brought up 3 kids on his own in a country town and had to work all hours to try and bring them up on his own. It was a long way from any sort of family, 5 hours from any sort of family support. So I guess in looking at those questions, thinking about his life, what am I most proud of, or what do I react to when I think about him, is that he was so very versatile and adaptable, and he's prepared to try anything, give anything a go, and if it doesn't work, well, I'll move on to the next thing. You know, nothing stops him, and he throws himself wholeheartedly into everything that he does. So he's known as the old man at Bunnings because he's a lot older than many of the staff, but he never stops. He runs the whole time, and if you go and they'll say, oh, you know, he never stops. You know, he's always there, and the customers love him because he's prepared to share his knowledge and knows where things are, or will suggest things that they can do. So it's about, and his why, if I look at his why, is about just enjoying life, just being a part of whatever he's doing at the time. He wouldn't have fallen into the standard mould of looking at a career and working his way up and doing this and doing that. You know, he tried, and that was what the ski industry was about, was trying, you know, finding a place in that. Was the first Australian to do a professional ski hill management, it's called, course in the US, and they were quite fascinated by this. And so there was a career path for him to do that, to combine the love of skiing with you know, resort management, I guess is the best way to put it. But it wasn't for him. And he recognised that early, so he knew his why was about something other than the standard work environment. But if I look at those questions, if I asked him those questions
Yeah.
on any given day,
Yeah.
he would say absolutely he's had breakfast
Yeah.
every morning,
Yeah.
regardless of what time he gets up or what else he's doing. You know, food is high on the list. What time did he go to sleep the night before? Unless the Tour de France is on or the Giro d'Italia, which was just on recently, and he's got to stay up to watch a bike race, then he's very careful about what time he goes to sleep. So what is he doing for exercise this week? Well, he never stops, runs the whole time.
Yeah.
So it would be more about what are you doing for downtime. So I think that's probably an interesting... and if I asked him what's he reading for pleasure, well, he would just look at me like this is from Mars, because reading is not something that he does. So
I read the sports section of the newspaper.
No, he doesn't. Just doesn't read. Yeah, if anything, he might be reading a cookbook.
Okay, there you go.
But they're interesting questions because when you think about them in terms of someone you know who's at a different stage of life or has travelled a different path, and you look at those questions, there's still an interesting range of responses in them that make you think more broadly about what they've done in their careers, what they're doing now, where they're heading, and how they've travelled that path. So in terms of the questions, I think they're just the best questions to have.
I agree.
Well, I think we've probably covered that topic in reasonable detail for you. We'll leave it there. I will put the links for the article and for the Simon Sinek episode of the podcast so you can look at your why as well. But for now, I'm Kim Bailey. She's Fulyana Osborne, and this is Inside Exec.